And then there were some more recent studies in the field of behavioral economics by a fellow named Dan Ariely at MIT, who wrote a book called Predictably Irrational. And it's really blowing the entire myth of rational economic behavior. This is very disturbing. If you remember Greenspan's testimony that his ideology may have been partially incorrect, this is some of what he was referring to as human beings don't necessarily act rationally. So what Dan Ariely did was he had a whole bunch of MBA students, and I'm really sorry about this, but there's how we are, gave them a self-scored math test where you got money for the number of correct answers. And they did a control group and found out the distribution of correct answers. Then they did a version where you could shred your answer sheet, and nobody would know if you had cheated, right in front of you. And then people reported how many they got correct. The whole distribution moved up by 2 out of 20. Over 50% of the people, roughly 60% of the people, cheated for that to happen, right? Unless they were just randomly smarter, but he replicated this in multiple places, right? But they only cheated by a little bit. They padded. I mean, they couldn't have been caught. They could have cheated the whole range, but they didn't. They just padded. Then when he said, here, I'm going to pay you in poker chips, right? So you turn in your test and I give you poker chips. You walk across the room to get your cash. It's literally 60 seconds later, but the cheating went up, the distribution moved up by 4 out of 20. Because it wasn't real, right? I'm not really cheating, it's just poker chips. Even though it turns into money right after. Then the most interesting one was on the waiting room on the way in. On the way in, they said, just write down here how many of the 10 Commandments you remember. Not are you religious, not do you subscribe to the 10 Commandments, nothing, just how many you remember. And when they went in every place they did this, at least 4 schools, multiple times, cheating dropped to 0. I find that's kind of exciting. I mean, it's sad. but this completely flies in the face that we either have a moral compass or we don't. And the more fun versions of this, with Malcolm Gladwell tells of a story where you can increase your score on Trivial Pursuit by spending 5 minutes before you play thinking of yourself as a college professor, compared to if you think of yourself as a soccer hooligan. They've done studies where if you put mirrors in the room, people are less likely to cheat. And if you have people thinking about luxury products before they go into a decision, they're more likely to be self-interested. So we are incredibly susceptible to the situations around us, right? So we can't count on ourselves to be ethical. This is what tips us into unhealthy compromise without knowing it. But then there's a twist. What comes from that is once we've made an action, we are hardwired to self-justify it. I am honest. I just cheated. This creates cognitive dissonance. We can't handle it, right? We actually get endorphins from rationalizing. It actually feels, they've done fMRIs on people, and you get little hits. If you can figure out a way to make those two make sense, right? So once we've taken, and it's more if you take visible action on something, then you feel like you have an emotional investment in that. You need to be right, so what we do is distort our perceptions. We either change our values, I don't really care about cheating, it's not so bad, right? Or I didn't really cheat, or it was just an experiment in real life, I wouldn't cheat, right? All these different things that have us self-justify, that gradually lower our bar. This is the slippery slope. When we talk about the slippery slope of ethics, it's situational forces tip us into something we wouldn't otherwise do, if they're negative forces, and once we've done it, we self-justify it. They did a study of a bunch of 6th grade kids where the only way they surveyed them on their attitudes about cheating, and then the only way to get prizes from taking a test was to cheat. It was easy to cheat, and there was no way to be caught, but they could see who had cheated, and those who had cheated had more lenient attitudes about cheating after they had done this, right? So you can see, back to my diagram of the unhealthy compromise, that it's the situational forces push us into the compromise, and it's the justifying that has us say, now I really got to play the game. The problem is that we become part of the situational forces for the people around us. And that's why I call this the downward spiral.